Story 1. I want the government to leave me alone, not constantly monitor my property and daily activities, or charge me money for my own property and everything I do. Story 2. I am a bleeding heart liberal, but I am really tired of other liberals stereotyping genders. For example, I shave my head, not my legs or armpits, and I mostly wear men's or androgynous clothes. A lot of my friends say, "You are non-binary and you do not even know." No, I am not. Stereotyping what I wear and what I look like does not automatically equate to a transgender identity. Story 3. I am as liberal as can be, but I get annoyed by people complaining about hurt feelings all the time. There are much bigger issues than being randomly offended. Story 4. I truly have a mix of views and do not easily slot into right or left. That really frustrates people on both sides of the political spectrum because, for the most part, they do not know what to do if you do not fit their view of the enemy. Story 5. I am a left-wing Arab immigrant currently living in the United Kingdom. I am queer and have many Jewish friends who are being harassed by pro-Palestine protesters for being openly Jewish. I am also an ex-Muslim living with my little sister, who was forced to wear a hijab because the neighborhood we live in has been taken over by radical Islamist immigrants and refugees. Take a guess why people get confused about my political leaning. Story 6. I am extremely liberal, but I think everyone should take a gun safety course. Knowing how to safely use firearms, even if you have no intention of ever owning one, is extremely valuable for demystifying them and debunking a lot of the nonsense that otherwise intelligent people believe. Story 7. How about this one? It is ridiculous that we only have two political parties and that no one ever has to form a coalition. Along the same lines, it is outrageous that third-party votes are never reported. Story 8. Me not wanting to hear about your political opinions does not mean I disagree with them. It means you need to stop talking about them for me to not find you obnoxious. Story 9. I think that transgender women should probably not be competing in women's athletics. The existence of men's and women's sports reflects a biological reality. For example, Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone has 6 of the 10 fastest times ever in the women's 400-meter hurdles, including the top 3, and she would not rank in the top 5,000 times for men. The data here is more anecdotal than anything. Frankly, this is low on my list of priorities, so it is not going to cause me to change political parties or anything. This does not say anything about recognizing transgender men and women as people or respecting their gender identity. I am just talking about sports. Story 10. I believe in calling out anyone who is wrong and giving credit if they do something right, regardless of who they are and what political party they belong to. I am often called a liberal nut and a conservative crazy person. Story 11. I am a libertarian, but I support some basic regulations like the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, food safety, workplace safety, and similar measures. I also support many, but not all, environmental protection laws. Story 12. All I really have to say is that I am socially left and economically right. Nobody agrees with me for some reason. Story 13. Athletes who have gone through puberty as biological males should not compete in women's sports. Otherwise, I fully support transgender rights. Story 14. People lean on shall not be infringed. But they forget that the sentence begins with a well-regulated militia. The rest of the sentence is just additions. The Founding Fathers either intended for states to well-regulate guns or for only state-established militias to bear arms. They definitely did not intend for completely unregulated individual ownership and use of any form of arms. States are allowed to outlaw doctors performing abortions, but they are not allowed to outlaw people receiving abortions. The best pro-life position is to increase fetus viability by innovating extraction and incubation technology, which I fully support. Anything less sacrifices existing rights in favor of future rights. Story 15. I agree that critical race theory should not be taught in elementary school. It is a graduate-level law class and would be far too confusing. Systemic racism, however, should be addressed at age-appropriate levels. The earliest age to begin this is about the same age that minorities start experiencing slurs. Therefore, it should always be addressed. Story 16. I own guns, am a Second Amendment supporter, and I am pro-choice. I believe religion should be completely removed from politics. Story 17, Guns. I am related to a transgender woman who was beaten by homophobic attackers. If the government ever wants to take the pistol out of her purse, they will have to step over my dead body. There are well over 600 million guns in this country with fewer than 350 million people. Gun control measures are not going to stop hateful people who do not mind breaking the law from harming innocents going about their business. The time for gun control was about 100 years ago. From a mathematical standpoint, we are far beyond the point where limiting firearms access for law-abiding citizens will meaningfully reduce the number of guns available for criminals. We need to empower vulnerable minorities in exercising their Second Amendment rights and teach people how to deal responsibly with the presence of weapons in our culture. The Black Panthers realized how vital the role of gun ownership was in leftist politics, and we have abandoned that entirely to our detriment. Firearms safety and possibly usage, similar to Boy Scouts training, should be taught in schools. Switzerland has done an excellent job integrating responsible firearms ownership into its culture, and we should learn from its policies instead of turning gun ownership into a left-right issue. A gun should be a tool everyone knows how to use. Regarding transgender women in sports, none of the Millennial, Generation X, or Baby Boomer transgender women I know believe they should be allowed to compete without any regulation in professional women's sports. Recreational sports at the local level are acceptable, but not professional sports. Several have argued that liberal Democrats helped destroy positive social sentiment toward the transgender movement by insisting that transgender people uniformly believe they should compete in whatever gender division they want, when this was a controversial idea even within the transgender community. The same applies to pronouns. Originally, pronouns were a useful mechanism for identification within transgender subcultures until the culture wars began and liberals decided every person needed pronouns, transgender or not. Many transgender people who are not Generation Z find this ridiculous and are frustrated that the movement has become distorted, and that the American left failed to ask the transgender community what they actually needed or wanted before making them a national punching bag. Story 18. Most of my opinions are based on what makes the most economical sense to me. I do not focus on the majority of social issues. This may make me seem aligned with groups that claim to support fiscal responsibility, but I am generally on the opposite side. I support universal health care because I believe it is a far more financially efficient model than private health insurance. I support expedited paths to citizenship for any migrants who pay taxes. I support the United States Agency for International Development because it pumps more money into the United States economy and increases our soft power. While it is beneficial that people receive food aid, that is a secondary reason for my support. Ultimately, I care about the effective and efficient use of money. Story 19. I believe anyone who is in the nation illegally, either by overstaying their visa or crossing the border unlawfully, should be deported. I have no idea why the vast majority of my political party seems to think otherwise. Story 20. There should be no democracy when it comes to voting. Many unqualified people are involved. A test should be given to qualify to vote. Story 21. I dislike Donald Trump, but I am also a conservative. I believe we should be cautious, value tradition and habit, and support distributing power away from the state to multiple sources to reduce the damage caused by abuses of power. I support stability, not chaos, and reason, not populism. These are qualities Donald Trump does not embody. My worldview is focused on preventing authoritarians like Donald Trump from gaining too much influence so that we learn the lessons of fascist dictatorships from the past. Story 22. Not being totally for or against Donald Trump has people assuming I am entirely on whichever side they are not. In reality, I am about 10 degrees left of center. Story 23. I think polygamous marriages should be legal, and I believe we should impose life sentences without parole for a wider range of crimes. Story 24. People on the left would think I am a conservative, and people on the right would think I am a progressive. I believe they are both wrong or at least not entirely correct on most issues. I generally do not have any good solutions myself. I tend to side with the moderately left in their vision of the future, but I often disagree with the tactics they would use to achieve it. I agree with conservatives that humans are not good at social engineering and would therefore choose the status quo on most issues rather than radical changes, as too many variables cause unintended consequences. However, I disagree that doing nothing is best. Slow, incremental changes are usually more successful in the long run. Story 25. For me, it is explaining capitalism. It is not the system of unregulated anarchy that we currently have, but oligarchs convinced everyone of lies about it to justify stealing from governments and oppressing the general public. They did that so well that their lies are now the de facto definition outside of academic economics. So if you say you want textbook capitalism, which is what everyone thinks of as democratic socialism, everyone confuses you with a conservative who wants tax cuts for the wealthy and to lose the government healthcare they desperately depend on. No, I just want smart regulations based on proven mathematical models, as well as increased government investment in social safety nets, education, and healthcare. Story 26. Canada. I am a new Democratic Party supporter, but I am also in favor of pro-business policies, including free trade deals. At the same time, I would like to reduce the negative social and environmental impacts of business practices as much as possible. For non-Canadians, the New Democratic Party is a democratic socialist party. Story 27. I think it would be much better if, instead of separating tax codes between individuals and corporations, we all paid the same tax on our income. Also, I would ban loans and the entire stock exchange. Story 28. I support immigration law enforcement, but legally. I support the Second Amendment, but I would like to see accountability laws, including insurance requirements and holding owners accountable for allowing guns to get into someone else's hands. I support work requirements for Medicaid and Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program assistance when recipients are single or have children aged 13 and older. I do not oppose higher taxes for the wealthy. I am not a typical Republican or Democrat. Story 29. I believe in a strong social safety net, including universal basic income, free healthcare, free education at all levels, and government-provided basic checking and savings accounts that are fully guaranteed against failure. I also believe in highly free markets with limited government intervention, except in cases of legitimate fraud. However, if the markets or businesses collapse, there will be no government support beyond the strong social safety net. Story 30. I am an atheist but lean slightly conservative on a few opinions that religious people hold due to their belief in God. I believe it is more of an evolutionary phenomenon than anything else, and sometimes evolutionary psychology aligns with traditional ideas. Story 31. I think it is perfectly acceptable for every country to enforce its immigration laws, and if you live in a country illegally, you should live in fear of being deported. Story 32. I don't think anybody would be mistaken. Nobody is going to confuse me for Make America Great Again or anything close to that. But people on the left might not like my tolerance level for violence. Luigi can walk free any day of the week. I don't know if fire would melt our ice situation, but I'm willing to see how it goes. If some bacon gets cooked up along the way, then so be it. Maybe the people that run some companies should feel a little unsafe when laying off thousands of workers or denying coverage. The only thing that really trickles down is violence. Maybe it should go the other way for a while. Story 33. I think taxing unrealized capital gains is complete idiocy. I also voted for the Democratic Party straight down the ballot and generally align with most other liberal views. Story 34. As a supporter of liberty and justice for all, Republicans and Democrats have recently come to believe that opposition to intolerance is unacceptable and even illegal. They have forgotten that Nazis, neo-Confederates, Make America Great Again supporters, and similar groups do not have full constitutional protections. Members of groups that advocate for and have engaged in violent attacks on the United States and the rule of the Constitution do not have constitutional protections. Their speech in favor of illegal violence is not the same as that of those who speak in favor of peaceful means, nor is it the same as those who acknowledge that the law allows for violence to defend the law. The law allows a police officer to shoot an active shooter. The law allows the military to attack rebels. Acknowledging this fact is simply acknowledging the existence of a legal principle. Story 35. Methamphetamine and heroin decriminalization and regulation might be better than the current state of affairs. Social safety nets and transfer payments exist at least to some degree due to market failures. A significant portion of intellectual property funded largely by taxpayer funding should be open source and held in trust by a consortium of governments, rather than private journals acting as medieval highway toll collectors. Software patents should be reconsidered drastically. The chilling effect on innovation currently in place outweighs any profit motive for maintaining the current system. We could collectively move toward a slight shift to a property-by-use framework of ownership. Marx, Rousseau, Seth Green, and Mark Maron should have been sent to military school at young ages. This is a political opinion. Story 36. Prescription drugs created and funded through grants from the National Institutes of Health should be subject to price controls. Taxpayers support their research and development and should receive some financial benefit from their contributions. Pharmaceutical companies benefit greatly under the current system while consumers overpay. Story 37. Not fully political. I am a firm supporter of the Second Amendment and against any kind of assault weapon or high-capacity magazine ban. I am also a staunch pacifist who refuses to have a fistfight, let alone a firefight. Story 38. I casually like guns, wear worn-out steel toes, can often be found wearing camouflage jackets, and dislike big government. My political views would make your average progressive liberal look like Tucker Carlson. Story 39. Everyone should have firearms and also mind their own business. Politicians should not take away individual rights, especially not because they believe it says so in a book that they never read. Story 40. I am a rational anarchist just like Professor Bernardo de la Paz. Many think I am a pink communist or a bleeding heart liberal. Story 41. I am conservative and pro-choice. I do not practice religion or care about it, nor do 99% of other conservatives I know. This leaves nobody confused except people online. Story 42. Kids today are too soft and do not learn how to deal with adversity without appealing to authority. I will not install social media on my phone or scan quick response codes because I value my privacy. Story 43. Taxation is theft. Many people think this means I am anti-taxation or against what we receive for our money. No, it is just the reality of things. Taxation is the taking of property under the threat of violence, which is theft. There is no social contract. Contracts require informed consent. In theory, in a fair and just system, taxation should be the small intrusion that prevents greater harm. By spending to support health, autonomy, happiness, and the advancement of society, we prevent greater harm. Roads, fire services, rational and just police, research, and social safety nets all prevent harm. Racism and other bigotry are resource drains that result in a few shouldering the burdens. A fair and just society shares these burdens across everyone, making the burden on the individual less. It is said that we receive about $6 in value for every $1 spent on social programs. We save on damage caused by those not supported by the community, and we benefit from the contributions of those empowered. It is a feedback loop that continues to provide benefits with each generation. Those with stable foundations are better able to prepare children and pass down knowledge and wealth. There is the issue of workers like coal miners who gave their lives for what we have. We should not abandon them once they can no longer work. Doing so is not only cruel but also supports destructive narratives in society. Why work hard if, in the future, you will just be discarded like refuse? I consider myself an old-school libertarian, one concerned with true liberty. I think in terms of trespass. I am confused by some Republicans and anarchists who claim to be libertarians. Those individuals favor paying more to build prisons rather than investing in education. Their views essentially support deeper state intrusion. Taxation remains theft. If you take $1 from me and later give me $6, it does not change that the original taking was theft. The refusal to acknowledge this truth is frustrating. When I hear the phrase social contract, I find it intolerable. When asked how to pay for roads, my response is, did you read Beyond Taxation is Theft? Story 44. I am pro-choice, although I do not believe abortion should be unrestricted. It should not be used as a method of birth control, and there should be a limit on the number of weeks. Story 45. Classical liberal who opposes identity politics obsession with race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, and similar categories. I want acceptance and tolerance, not progressive propaganda or blatant bigotry. Story 46. Just because I appreciate the ideals the United States is supposed to stand for does not mean I agree with how those ideals have been carried out throughout history. Story 47. I am a big believer in the United States Constitution. This leads the Republican Party to believe I am a Republican, the Democratic Party to believe I am a Democrat, and both are wrong. Story 48. I have a problem with transgender women competing in events where they easily outperform the other women. Anyone who questions this is labeled a supporter of extreme right-wing ideologies. I have been intimately familiar with how the global right has used sexual orientation and minorities as scapegoats to amass power and instill fear in others. It is a difficult issue to reconcile at times. Story 49. Not so much a political opinion, but most people would assume I am a conservative for my lifestyle, though I am very liberal and progressive. I am a straight white male who drives a truck, listens to country music, plays golf, and enjoys fishing. I am a very stereotypical conservative. Because of this, I am around a lot of conservatives, and it is always funny when they talk to me about former President Donald Trump and assume I am with them. No, I am not. I am not one of them. Regarding an actual political opinion, transgender people generally should not be competing in women's sports. I think the political right goes too far on this and makes it a bigger deal than it is, but the political left does not handle this well either. Story 50. I think that Christian persecution is very real in the Middle East and that most liberals and leftists, often Westerners but not always, dismiss it largely because of their own unresolved religious trauma, lack of knowledge of other, mainly non-Western Christian traditions, and sometimes the genuine desire not to appear bigoted. I say this as a leftist in the United States who sees the Islamophobic attacks on Zoran Mamdani as nothing but bigotry. Story 51. I am very conservative on many issues such as economics, foreign policy, and gun rights, but I have a strongly pro-abortion stance that is more radical than most members of the Democratic Party. Story 52. Yeah, I have some sticking points that my political peers aren't very happy with. I think misandry and anti-white racism are both very real, widespread structural problems that are frequently misinterpreted or overlooked by, understandably in historical context, female and people of color-centric social sciences. Particularly male social interaction, male vulnerability, and inclusivity within male-coded spaces are badly misrepresented or misunderstood. Dynamics going on within white male hierarchies are also often completely misrepresented or misunderstood by prominent people in gender and racial studies. I understand a lot of people think that is a denial of the insights they've had regarding intersectionality, patriarchy, or whiteness, but it really isn't. There have been countless solid ideas, but we are genuinely missing something important in that model. I think most gun control ideas proposed are wildly unrealistic, do not account for existing American culture, and often reveal that lawmakers genuinely do not know what they are talking about when it comes to guns. I would like more gun regulations myself, but the credibility of the people pushing for gun control has been so badly damaged that getting there is more difficult than if they had simply done nothing. Things like banning specific models, generally overlooking the regulation of ammunition, or references to assault weapons always read to a person experienced with gun culture as ignorance. I would also teach my kids to maintain their assigned gender roles while they are under 18 and encourage them to wait until they are at least 26 to partake in any kind of gender-affirming care, including for their assigned gender. I think minors need guidance more than agency, and patience can only help one understand their body, mind, and nature more completely. It is part of a more authoritarian parenting mindset than the left is usually comfortable with, not something specifically related to transgender issues, but that is the hot button that gets pressed. People who vote like me tend to hear these things and think I support extrajudicial detention centers in El Salvador or the immigration and customs enforcement programs, which are just shockingly insane policies that are factually unrelated to any of those issues. It is genuinely a bit jarring when I am accused of being a populist reactionary because I am pretty much a technocratic syndicalist in reality. We really need ranked choice voting, by the way. Story 53. As a man raised by two strong women, I dislike feminism. I believe women should be paid equally, have bodily autonomy, and enjoy the rights feminism aims to achieve. However, feminism as an industry can be toxic to women, men, and especially minorities. It often serves the interests of wealthy white women while negatively impacting others. Both my mothers disliked that version of feminism. Wealthy women with cooks, nannies, and chauffeurs claiming no obstacles exist just because they are women. Real parenting requires sacrifices from both genders unless one is extremely privileged. Feminism can make women feel like failures, either focus on a career and be labeled a bad mother, or focus on motherhood and be dismissed as a stay-at-home mom. It can also make men feel like failures if they prioritize family and can excuse poor behavior as long as they provide financially. My mothers were skeptical of feminism throughout their lives. I only understood why after becoming a stay-at-home father supporting my wife. It was an eye-opening experience. They warned me against false assumptions that it would be easy. I love women and support my wife by reversing traditional gender roles, but I reject commercial or capitalist feminism. If feminism had truly succeeded, single-income households with one breadwinner and one homemaker would not be an issue, and no one would care about gender roles. Instead, we have a situation where no one wins and everyone works for low wages. Yes, arguments about what feminism really means exist, but what is presented to most people is misleading and harmful. That commercialized version is toxic. Story 54. I am pro-gun and generally lean very liberal politically. I am not into waiting for an emergency response team to show up while I just hope for the best. Story 55. I want to go to my lesbian weed-growing friend's wedding and celebrate with their adopted children, whom I have taught to be responsible with handling a variety of firearms. If you entered the country illegally, send them home. Gender dysphoria has been overapplied, and any hormone therapy in support of transitioning should wait until at least 18 years old. Biological males should never compete in women's sports. Story 56. I am generally okay with the transgender ruling in Tennessee and laws that minimize the focus on lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender topics for elementary school children. This opinion piece in the New York Times captures my thoughts on the subject. Story 57. I have many guns, more than hands, but not an arsenal by any means. I do not support most gun owners. I do not even trust people driving cars. I will vote for every gun control measure if it means preventing someone from accidentally sending a bullet into my living room. Story 58. I believe there are three sexes: male, female, and intersex, previously referred to as hermaphroditic. These are genetic and cannot change. There are also three gender labels: man, woman, and non-binary, which includes identities like gender fluid and a gender that do not fit into the binary man-woman system. Therefore, if you do not identify as a man or woman, you are non-binary. Anyone can be any gender because gender is not biological. It is social. The only pronouns we really need are you and your, because it is respectful to speak directly to someone rather than behind their back. However, if necessary, they/them pronouns are preferable to alternatives such as ze or zer. Story 59. I do not hold political opinions as my identity, the way many people these days do. Also, I understand that I am not at a barbecue or social outing to change political hearts and minds. That is an insanely narcissistic thing to do. I am not that important, nor are my opinions perfect or better than your own. Because of this, I am able to do two things that make it hard for people to label me or put me in a category. First, I can empathize with people and mirror them in polite small talk. As a result, most people find me friendly in small talk and think I agree with them implicitly, even though I never said that. This smooths over any social interaction I have, from the most hardline conservative to the most hardline liberal, and everyone in between. Where I get into trouble is when we are drinking and having great conversation. I will almost always take the devil's advocate position. So, if anyone makes a declarative statement one way or the other, I may say, yes, but the other side also thinks this. I am not defending my position. I am just fueling the conversation with the opposing side to the initial offering. Because of these approaches, people tend to never know where I truly stand on issues. I like it that way. I will offer my opinion if asked and if I feel it is a worthy discussion, but in most cases I am not asked, and I understand that no one cares. So I default to the above, either to smooth small talk and avoid politics, or to engage in devil's advocate for conversation continuation. Story 60. If we lived in an ideal world and I happened to be its ruler, I would ban abortion. In said ideal world, you could transfer or extract the fetus as we are currently doing, but not outright terminate it. Story 61. I think that vaccines are terrible and not only cause autism but other problems as well, and I am a leftist. I find it confusing that so many of my leftist friends trust the pharmaceutical industry so much that they would be pro-vaccine. The pharmaceutical industry is corrupt. Story 62. Poor people are horrible. When people hear that, they get flabbergasted. Rich people are 3 times as horrible. I am a misanthrope and a leftist. Dislike for humans does not discriminate. Women are horrible. Men are 3 times as horrible. I am a misanthrope and I like feminists. Dislike for humans does not discriminate. Story 63. My wife is an immigrant, but I support the current deportation situation. You walk into someone's house through the front door, not the window, or you will get tossed out, especially if you start trouble. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.